Hello, my friends, and welcome back to Imagine If. I hope you all had a wonderful Christmas, along with a Happy New Year. And this Imagine If episode would be what I call a special gift, a beginning on MCU Imagine If episodes. To start off this year of 2024, I have been thinking about starting this MCU thing, as I said, and I know a perfect way to start it off with. I'm sure I'm excited to show you all the ideas I've had in mind, along with the ones that you asked me to do and to show you all in future days to come. As I look into Spider Man Homecoming, I ask myself, how would events in it and the rest of the timeline go if society saw Spider Man as a criminal? I say, imagine if Spider Man was a criminal in Spider Man Homecoming. More like, imagine if Spider Man was tricked, which made society view him as a threat, a criminal. Sit back, relax, and let us explore this twisting tale. So, the story of this Imagine If will begin when Spider Man confronts the Vulture in his lair. Vulture is explaining to Spider Man how famous people like Tony Stark don't care about them. As Vulture was about to summon his wings, he thought of an idea to try and make Spider Man believe the words he was trying to say. Now, this is when the timeline forever changes from this point. Vulture tells Spider-Man how he knows that Stark threw him in the dirt, taking away his fancy suit and gadgets. He then tells Spider-Man that he knows what it's like to lose everything, and he is taking the cargo plane to try and prove to others that they matter as well. He then explains that if he helps him bring the plane to his new base, then Stark could see how valuable he really is. Spider-Man stands there, hesitant. He does believe that Vulture was trying to trick him, but deep down, he knows that he was right. Stark did throw him in the dirt, and he wants to show Stark how much he really matters. Spider-Man sighs and says, knowing that he might regret this in the future, that he will help him take the plane. Vulture says with a smirk while summoning a pocket knife to free himself from the webbing that he made the right choice. The two went out of there and waited for the right moment to go onto the plane. When the time came, Spider-Man got onto Vulture's back and the two were able to get in the plane with ease. They could see all of Stark's belongings and their mouths dropped in shock. The two then went to the front of the plane where the controls were at, and they set coordinates to the new base. Back at the empty Stark Tower, Happy Hogan sees the plane turning coordinates, and he notified Tony Stark about this. Tony found this very odd and frightening. He believed that whoever is in his plane is a big threat. He got his suit on, and he flew to where the plane was going to land. The plane lands, and Vulture's men start to take the cargo out. Vulture tells Spider-Man to help his men as he needs to take care of something. When Vulture leaves, Iron Man arrives. Seeing Spider-Man helping with taking out the cargo, he asks Spider-Man as his helmet was showing his face on what was he thinking. Spider-Man steps forth and tells Iron Man that he believed that this was the way to prove to him that he is more than what is taken for granted. Iron Man tells Spider-Man that what he was doing was absolute madness, and that this wasn't the way to prove himself better. As the two were arguing, the men pulled out their weapons and began to fire at Iron Man. Iron Man sees this, and his helmet covers his face to protect himself from the firing. He begins to repulsor blast the men as Spider-Man was trying to tell them to stop, but they wouldn't listen. Spider-Man could see what he has done. He doesn't want to fight against his mentor. The adrenaline rushed in, and Spider-Man decided to flee away. When Spider-Man left, Iron Man took out all of Vulture's men. He tried to find Spider-Man, but he was nowhere to be seen. He Tony couldn't believe what Spider-Man was doing. Now he started to be a threat to him. He had to find him. He knew that Spider-Man had to have more of a good reason to do these things. In the city, Spider-Man lands onto one of the rooftops. He couldn't believe what he just committed. Vulture tricked him. As Spider-Man is having a hard time taking this in, Vulture arrives. Spider-Man tells Vulture that he tricked him and now Stark was going to come after him. Vulture says that there's more than where it comes from. Before Spider-Man could even land a punch on Vulture, he gets knocked down by the Shocker. Spider-Man believes that Vulture got him out. Vulture says that Shocker was punching Spider-Man in the face, that he has served his purpose. And now he needs to take a long rest. Spider-Man jumped over the Shocker and landed. He got up and kicked Shocker back and saw as Shocker fell off of the building, falling into the road, breaking his neck. Vulture sees this in shock that he starts to flee. He might have just pulled Spider-Man's last string. Spider-Man doesn't move, but just watches the murder he just committed. Iron Man arrives behind him, and he is even more angry. First the plane, and now murder? What's next, Peter? Iron Man says to Spider-Man in absolute ferocity. Spider-Man tries to convince Iron Man about how Vulture tricked him into doing this, but Iron Man was not having it. As Iron Man went for the attack, Spider-Man webbed him in the face and kicked him back. He fled away from Iron Man and the murder he committed, knowing that his life was now going downhill. Iron Man gets the webbing off of his face and he sees Spider-Man no longer around. He comes out of his suit and he just breathes out both an angry and sad expression. He really liked the kid. He saw great potential in him, but now he threw that all away. Tony knew that he had to tell the police about this, on how Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, nearly took all of his loot unnoticed. When Ned Leeds heard the news about Spider-Man's identity being revealed, along with the rest of the news about the murder, the cargo plane heist, Ned couldn't really take this in. He knew that what they were saying was wrong. He knows that Peter wasn't a bad guy. He went out into the city to look for Spider-Man because he had to be there. They were best friends after all. When Aunt May heard of this, she tried everything she could to call Peter up, but Peter wasn't answering. He left his phone at the rooftop where he left Tony. The others heard about this, that they started to hate Peter, but Ned and May knew that Peter was innocent. They were all deceived. Spider-Man enters an abandoned building that was near a bank and his school. He knows Tony and the police are after him. He needs to stay low to try and survive on his own, while trying to find Vulture. But he knew that if he wants to find Vulture to prove his innocence, he has to do something he's going to regret. So, with so much regret, he went into the bank and came out with a bag full of cash unnoticed. As Spider-Man is swinging back to the building where he was going to stay, Ned sees him and goes after him. When Ned enters the building, a loud creak was made. Spider-Man turns to see him in fear. He tells Ned that it wasn't what it looks like. Ned tells him that he knows that he isn't bad and he came here alone. He then asks Spider-Man how all of this happened, and Spider-Man explains with his head down in shame about everything. About Vulture tricking him into taking the cargo from Stark's plane, killing Shocker, and everything else. Ned was all ears on all his best friend was explaining, and he couldn't believe this. He tells Spider-Man that he will help him into bringing in the Vulture to prove his innocence. Spider-Man thanked Ned, and they did their handshake. Ned got his laptop out and began to work. He asks Spider-Man what he's going to do while he tries to track Vulture, and Spider-Man tells Ned that he might have to do something he's going to regret. He gets a brick of cash out of the bag from the bank he stole from, and he goes into the city. When Spider-Man was swinging through the city, he heard a scream in the distance. He gets a look to see a man mugging a woman. As the man was running, Spider-Man got him and brought him to the rooftop while giving the woman back her belongings. The man asks Spider-Man if he was going to kill him, but Spider-Man tells him no. He then tells the man that he needs his help. The man then asks Spider-Man, with his hands on his hips, on why he needs his help. Spider-Man pulls out the brick of cash and tells the man that he will be paid handsomely if he brings in a group of other men and meet him in the abandoned building. Spider-Man asks the man if they have a deal, and the man says that they do. The man takes the cash, and Spider-Man drops him off below, watching as the man disappeared in the darkness. Spider-Man returns to where Ned was, and he takes off his mask, saying that their help will be here soon. Ned asks Peter if he thinks this is all worth it, and Peter says that it is honestly the only way he could think of on finding Vulture. Ned nodded, and they continued to try and get at least a hint on where Vulture fled to. During this, Aunt May gets a knock on her door. She answers, and a group of police officers came in, telling her that she should come with them. The police also took Liz Allen, MJ, Flash Thompson, and everyone else that knows about Peter Parker. They needed all the information they needed to find Parker and put him behind bars. Back at the abandoned building, Peter puts his mask on as he sees the man he talked to earlier come in with a group of other thieves. Spider-Man pulls out cash to give to each person, telling them to get the stuff they need because they are going to need all the help they can get to find the Vulture. Everyone spread it out, making that place their new home. Over the past few weeks, Spider-Man hunted everyone that worked for the Vulture, trying to get information out of them as he is wearing his new full black suit version of his original suit that Stark gave him earlier. He assigned his employees to take out anyone that tries to know their location. As those few weeks came by, the crime rates were rising higher than before. Spider-Man never paid attention to the neighborhood that he forgot what it was like to be that friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. One day, when Spider-Man was returning to the base, he heard a cry for help in one of the alleyways. He went over there to know what was going on. He sees a crook with a knife, putting the tip of the knife against the throat of the woman. The woman cried for help, but no one ever heard. Spider-Man came in and took the crook down. The woman asks Spider-Man as Spider-Man was tying up the crook with his webbing on why he isn't killing him. Spider-Man says as he was leaving that he never kills. The woman sees Spider-Man leave, and she asks herself, is what the news say about Spider-Man being a murderer false? Are they lying? She notified the police about how Spider-Man saved her life, and Iron Man arrived to check the scene out. He checked Spider-Man's heat signatures to see which direction Spider-Man fled to. When he was done scanning, Iron Man went back to his office at the New Avengers compound, and he was looking at the chart, where he was analyzing where Spider-Man was mostly seen. He was mostly seen near and around the school and the abandoned building. When Tony went deeper into the areas where Spider-Man was seen, he noticed that it was a pattern that showed where Spider-Man was hiding all this time. Tony got into his suit and he flew over there as fast as he could. Spider-Man enters the hideout and asks Ned if they got Vulture's location. Ned said as he was wiping sweat from his forehead that he finally found his location. and it was pretty easy. Ned shows Peter that Vulture was in Liz's home all along. How could I have forgotten? Peter asks himself. He remembers how Vulture was Liz's father. So without wasting time, Peter got his mask and went to Liz's home to end this hunt once and for all. When Spider-Man leaves the hideout, Iron Man flies in. Spider-Man's men charged at Iron Man, and Iron Man began to knock them out one at a time. Ned sees Iron Man, and he quickly makes a run for it, getting his laptop and everything else he got. When the crooks were defeated, Iron Man saw Ned gone. He sees one of the extra computers on, and he sees the location on where Spider-Man was heading. Iron Man finds this odd, as he remembers Spider-Man mentioning someone named the Vulture. He went over to the location Spider-Man was heading to. Spider-Man arrives at the rooftop of Liz's home. He sees the Vulture on the phone, talking with someone. He hears the Vulture say how he will head to London tonight. As the call ended, Spider-Man crashed through the ceiling, telling Vulture that he isn't going anywhere. Vulture sees him, and then he says, "I was wondering how long it would take for you to find me." After Vulture says that, Spider-Man hears someone ask what that crash was, and he turns to see that it was Liz. Liz just stands there, frightened to see Spider-Man there. As Spider-Man is telling Liz how his father was the Vulture, Spider-Man's spider senses went off. He turns to see Vulture's wings come out and dash straight at him. Spider-Man dodges it and sees the wings, knocking back Liz and knocking Liz out cold. Iron Man jumps down through the crashed roof and lands. He repulsor blasts Spider-Man, stunning Spider-Man. He then blasted out the wings and they crash down, shutting off. He then turns to the Vulture, whom he sees, saying that it was an honor to finally meet him. Iron Man was about to repulsor blast Vulture, but Vulture's wings reactivated and knocked him back. Iron Man flew back to the wall, falling through it and getting knocked out. As Spider-Man is getting back up, Vulture grabs him and flies into the air. Vulture then flies down and smashes Spider-Man to the ground, injuring his back badly. Vulture backs away and flies out of there as he is looking back at his wounded daughter. Spider-Man, with all of his effort, threw a spider tracer at Vulture's wings so that he could track him later on, before Iron Man comes in, knocking him out. Iron Man leaves with Spider-Man in his clutches, taking him to jail. When they are gone, Ned arrives and sees the damage that was in the house. He hears a gasp on his right, and he sees Liz on the floor with blood coming out of her. Ned goes to her and calls up the police. As Liz sees him in shock, she asks where her father was, and Ned says as he is leaving that Spider-Man tried to bring the one responsible to justice. He then tells Liz that he can't stay long because Spider-Man needs him. He runs out of there as the ambulance arrives at that same street. Peter wakes up in his cell, finding that his suit and web shooters were not on him. He sees Tony in front of him, who tells him that he should have turned himself in instead of going on a wild goose chase. Peter stands on his feet and tells Tony that Vulture was there, and he didn't even help in bringing him in. Tony yells at Peter, saying that if this Vulture guy is responsible, it still doesn't make sense for the murder of the Shocker. Peter just stands there, loss of words. He knows that Tony was right about one thing, about the murder of the Shocker that he did indeed commit. He watches as Tony walks out of there, with the cell being locked behind him. Peter couldn't believe this. He was so close into taking in the Vulture. He believed that this was it, that he will suffer his fate for the rest of his days. But he was wrong. Outside of the prison, Ned is in the back, on his laptop, hacking his way through to free Peter. When he was able to shut everything down in the prison, he put his laptop away and destroyed the evidence. Peter sees that the lights were out and his cell, was unlocked. He ran out of there as fast as he could, and he got his suit and web shooters, knowing that this is Ned's intelligent work. The two met up in one of the alleyways as the police were looking for them. Peter says to Ned that he heard Vulture say that he'll meet someone in London. Ned asks Peter how they are going to get there, and Peter said that if they sneak aboard a boat, a ship, or a plane unnoticed, then they could go to London. Ned agreed to it, and the two went to the coastline, waiting for the right moment to get onto a cruise ship that was leaving the next morning. When morning came, the two snuck into a cruise ship that was told would be going over to London. They stayed where they were, sneaking around on getting food and drinks, knowing that they are one step closer to getting Vulture this time. Back at the prison where Ned helped Peter escape, Tony was looking around, trying to find on where Peter could have gone now. He was then notified about Liz Allen's injury, and he decided to pay her a visit. When he went into the room at the hospital, he sees Liz in tears. He asks her what was wrong, and Liz says that she couldn't believe her father was the Vulture this whole time. Tony started to ask about her father, and Liz told him everything. From all of this information, Tony now knows that Peter didn't mean for any of this to happen. He went out of the hospital and told everyone how the man named the Vulture was the one truly responsible for trying to take his cargo and framing Spider-Man for it. Spider-Man's name was cleared for the cargo ship, but he wasn't yet excused for the murder of the Shocker and the robbery of the bank. Later on, around nighttime, Vulture arrives in London. He lands in one of the alleyways where fog was surrounding him. In front of him came Mysterio, who said to the Vulture that he failed to take the cargo ship. Vulture says to Mysterio that he did indeed fail on that part, but he did succeed on framing Peter Parker. Mysterio says to the Vulture that this plan better work, and if it doesn't, he will have his head. The two walk away into the darkness of the fog. At that exact time, Peter and Ned finally arrive in London. The two quickly went into one of the sewer tunnels and they looked at the location of the Vulture. Ned got his laptop out and he found Vulture's location. Peter goes to the location alone, while undercover. As Peter arrives at the spot, he sees the spider tracer on the ground. He picks it up in anger, knowing that the Vulture has found out that he was being followed. Peter looks around and he tries to think of what to do now. Should I give up? Should I just accept this fate? Peter asks himself. But Peter remembered what Stark said about if he was nothing without a suit, then he should finish it now. Peter walks back to where Ned was, knowing that the mission has just begun. This is how Imagine If Spider-Man Was a Criminal in Homecoming would end. What do you think of it? Are you wanting to know what would happen in Far From Home? Give me your opinions on what you think is going to happen next, and we shall soon find out what happens next in this Lone Wolf's adventure. But until that time comes, my dear friends, farewell.